more, there was an interesting story that I picked up on a few days ago. It was in the lead up to June 16th, which was what, yesterday? And it was an interesting part where they had picked up on, I think it was post on Facebook from members of Dudula, and I was trying to figure out what was Dudula wanting to do, I think around the Rosettenville area. And this got the South African Human Rights Commission very worried, so much so that they actually went to the police commissioner, Fani Masemola, to raise a complaint, to raise an alarm about expected Dudula movement and the like. So that's kind of what this conversation is on the back of. It's trying to understand what happened, but most importantly, the work of the SA Human Rights Commission. Every now and again, you'll hear about something that's gone awry, and people will say that they're calling the SA Human Rights Commission is taking this matter on. It's going to be dealt with. So we'll find out a little bit more about that, but also just their own issues, right? Because if you listen to politicians from time to time, what you hear is that a lot of the work that they try and do, what gets blocked is by these kind of organizations that exist. There are lots of complaints about things like that. So I'll be bringing Chris Nissen on in just a bit. I really see a lot of your calls, a lot of your interaction before he's even come on. I will take some calls actually to get your thoughts about the SA Human Rights Commission while we get Chris up on the line for you. Godfrey in Dorenport, hi.
Hi, Madam.
Good morning, Godfrey.
Yeah, I just wanted the South Africans just to be aware and know what the South African Human Rights Commission is all about. I had a case against the South African Reserve Bank, and I reported that case to the South African Human Rights Commission, but they refused to help me. And then I had to take that case upon myself to the Equality Court. And then as I'm speaking now, the South African Reserve Bank failed to oppose my papers because I had a prima facie case and with the prima facie evidence. So the South African Human Rights Commission, for me, doesn't work for the South Africans. I think it's working for the allies. I even raised my frustration with what is that guy, man? He's working late at your station. I don't know, whoever.
Oh, Bra Aubrey, maybe?
Bra Aubrey, yes, Bra Aubrey. I even told him if it was up to me, that institution was supposed to be closed. Maybe that mandate given to another institution.
Remind me again, Godfrey, the issue that you had raised that you wanted help with. What was it about? Because I will also put it to the Human Rights Commission, and I think the idea where you say that they're elitist is an important point that they need to answer to, because in some people's minds, that's the only time we see them is when there's a peak controversial issue that's big in the public spotlight. That is something that they probably need to speak to. What was the issue?
The issue was about unfair discrimination, harassment, and then my dignity, and then my invasion of privacy by the South African Reserve Bank employees, and then they refused to help me. The issue is I was dismissed by the South African Reserve Bank after they ignored a psychological report from my psychologist, and then without any further report from their own psychologist to declare me fit to stand for disciplinary proceedings. They continued after their in-house doctor, Dr. Kuzwayo, advised them to ignore that particular report. So that is why I had to take them through the Equality Court.
All right.
So South African Human Rights Commission, they refused to help me. And then I remember I was speaking to this lady, Zamantung Wambeki. I think she's a provincial manager there in Gauteng. She refused.
Okay.
In the first place, she said, "No, Godfrey, I'm going to help you." I don't know what changed somewhere along the way.
So there was some commitment to help.
Yeah, there was a commitment, okay. And then out of the blue, that commitment just faded away. I don't know why, but I don't want to mention things that I don't have evidence with. But according to the way things are happening, especially with the institutions that I'm against,
okay.
And then in terms of the institutions where I go and seek help, and then I'm against the South African Reserve Bank, you can see that there is this influence of which I can't come with evidence. But
okay, Godfrey, it's just your thoughts. Yeah. I want you to be able to listen. So I'm going to let go of your call. Thank you so much. That's Godfrey out in Doornpoort, who's complained that he finds the SA Human Rights Commission to be elitist in approach. We'll find out a little bit more. I am joined, I believe, via Zoom by Dr. Tshepo Madlingozi, who is a full-time commissioner of the SA Human Rights Commission. I think you listened to a little bit of that. Good morning, Tshepo. Welcome to Radio 702.
Good morning, Tshidi, and good morning to your listeners.
Thank you, Prof. Prof, let's start maybe with that call. I wanted to speak about Tutula, but let's start with that perception in and of itself before we even look at the work of the SA Human Rights Commission. The caller says he feels it's elitist, that because he had an issue with a reserve bank, he had approached the Human Rights Commission. They had said they would help, but he felt completely disregarded. I think he said he had a psychological report, his own psychological report. But the crux of it is that you're seen as a commission to pick and choose matters that speak to an elitist member of society, an elite members of society.
No, thank you for this opportunity and thank you for having us. The South African Human Rights Commission, Tshidi, we receive about 8,000 complaints every year. We are able to address about 6,000 complaints. The majority of complaints have to do with service delivery issues, so issues of water, electricity, healthcare. Then the second biggest category, of course, would be issues to do with equality. Now, this work is done mainly in our 9 provinces. As I said, every year 6,000 complaints, and we are able to deal with those complaints and address those complaints. Where it becomes a little bit difficult is when we do the investigation, we make a finding, but then there's no implementation by a municipality, by state departments, or by big business, by a private institution. So that is where sometimes members of the public do feel disgruntled, where the Human Rights Commission has acted, but like a court, we can implement, we can give you a house, we can give you healthcare, we can only make a finding based on the constitution. But I must say that we appreciate the criticism. We are a Chapter 9 institution. We are accountable to the public. And if Godfrey can send me the details, I will certainly follow up on this case.
All right, thank you so much. I'll ask the producers to help in that regard. But let's go back a step further and about the primary mandate. And I think that's where the clarity might lie around some of these issues, on the fact that you make assessments and then you'll make recommendations based on what's before you, but you don't have the implementing powers. And that's a back and forth around Chapter 9 institutions that's happened for years in our country. But if we're to look at the actual primary mandate, why does the SA Human Rights Commission exist? What is its job? What would you say?
So the South African Human Rights Commission, as you say, it's a Chapter 9 institution, is a independent constitutional body, meaning that it is established by the constitution. It is supposed to be the interface between society, civil society, as well as the state. We do our job independently. We get the budget from the state, but we are only accountable to Parliament. We're not accountable to the president. We're not accountable to the Minister of Justice. We are only accountable to the people of South Africa via Parliament. Our mandate is the widest mandate, the broadest mandate if you compare to other Chapter 9 institutions. The public protector, the mandate is very clear, it's very narrow. The Auditor General, very clear mandate, IEC. Our mandate is to promote, protect, and monitor the observance of human rights. That's very, very broad. So that's the first challenge, the broadness of the mandate. The second challenge, of course, is funding. We only have about 200 employees. Now, 200 employees spread around the country, in a country of almost 60 million people. That's a big challenge. But as I said, every year we are able to address 6,000 complaints. Every year we are able to conduct investigations and have inquiries, about 10 inquiries every year. Every year we carry out about 2,400 awareness raising exercises. So that is our mandate. We have achieved a lot of gains. When we don't get satisfaction based on our recommendations, we are able to do 2 things. One, we can subpoena an official of the state. That subpoena is chaired by a commissioner. It is under oath, and the person cannot lie because you cannot lie under oath. So that's one. A subpoena is a very powerful tool that we have. The second one, of course, is that we're able to go to court to litigate. But what the state cannot do is that they cannot choose to ignore our recommendations, even though they are recommendations. The act is very clear. They've got 90 days to say how they will implement that. And if they fail to implement that, we're able to either go to court to enforce the decision or to go to parliament, because parliament is also part of an oversight body that we share oversight responsibilities with.
All right. I'm in conversation with Professor Tshepo Madlingozi, who's a full-time commissioner at the South African Human Rights Commission. What are the questions that you have? Feel free to put in questions, put in calls even. You can call on 011 883 0702, 072 702 1702 to send in voice notes and WhatsApps. What are the questions that you have about the work that they do? And what are the comments? I mean, we started with criticism and he's kind of taken that on his chin as well. So what are the perspectives? I think there's also a lot of myths around what the Human Rights Commission represents. Here's a chance for us to debunk them. But first, let's go on a break. 10:21, the Clement Manyathela show. Tshidi Madia standing in for Clement Manyathela. We are in conversation with the South African Human Rights Commission. I'm in conversation specifically with Professor Tshepo Madlingozi, who's a full-time commissioner at the Human Rights Commission. Prof, I want to go back a little bit to the issue that actually led to this conversation. It was raising an alarm about the Dudula's activities and a concern from the Human Rights Commission. What was it that worried you? And this was in the lead up to Youth Day, and whether or not that materialized, or did police step up as you'd wished?
Yes. Last week, we became aware of a series of social media posts. Those posts, in our opinion, amounted to incitement of potential violence. They secondly also amounted to propagation of hate speech. So we made that assessment and we then contacted the National Commissioner of Police to one, alert the commissioner to this post. Number two, to put the commissioner on terms that they need to investigate and act. And I must say that we received a very swift response from the National Commissioner of Police and the Hawks. And all I can say is that, yes, they did act on Sunday. On Monday, there were some marches, but those marches were under the watchful eye of the police, and it was a peaceful protest. The point here is that, of course, all of us are allowed to raise any concerns about criminality. What you are not allowed to do is to incite violence, number one. Number two, to propagate hate speech against an entire group of people. Number three, to take, the law into your own hands. So in our statement, we are very clear that we should not dismiss general grievances, that people must report criminality and suspicious acts to the police, but that the freedom of expression is not absolute. There is no space for hate speech and there's no space to incite violence.
That in and of itself actually led me to something I've seen. It wasn't about the Human Rights Commission itself, but it was about other NGOs and other bodies, and the way that they often seem to be an enemy. Even government, you said earlier you do report to Parliament and not necessarily to the President or ministers. They often position even Chapter 9 institutions, but a lot of NGO work as opponents of what is meant to be done in government. In this case, I can tell you already, I'm looking at some of the WhatsApps, and people would rather align themselves with Tutula. And it's almost like your point that you are hearing, what the issue is that Tutula has raised, is almost irrelevant versus the fact that you are seen as a organization that's hindering what Tutula is attempting to do.
No, as I said, we welcome any criticism. Let me start by saying, going back to my first point, which is that out of the 6,000 complaints, the majority have to do with issues that concern South Africans, issues of water, issues of electricity, issues of healthcare, issues of education. So the majority of the issues that we deal with and that we address and find solutions to are issues that pertain to the poorest of the poorest in our society. The second point that we need to make is that the Constitution is very clear. The Constitution applies to everyone who finds themselves in South Africa, and that the right to dignity, the right to equality, the right to freedom from violence, those rights are sacrosanct and that they applied universally to everyone. The third point that we always make all the time consistently is to say foreign nationals need to respect the laws and regulations of our country. We've said that. In fact, last week we were in court on this issue of undocumented migration. And the fourth point that we always make with the state is that the state needs to capacitate the border management authority so that they can really attend to the fact that there's no doubt there is unregulated migration. There's no doubt that our borders are porous, and that all of this puts a lot of strain on service delivery. It puts a lot of strain on crime fighting because the police are unable to trace undocumented people. So we are very clear about that. But the Constitution is very clear. The laws of the country are very clear. You are not allowed to take the law into your own hands. Tshidi, we've learned from the July 2021 unrest that we should never ignore social media posts, because we know what happened with the July 2021 unrest, that there was incitement that led to violence, that led to a loss of life. And therefore, we have activated early warning mechanisms where we monitor online activities to ensure that there is freedom of expression, there is respect for the law, there is freedom to peaceful protest and assembly, but within the bounds of the law.
Earlier, you said that a lot of the issues we deal with are service delivery related. What are South Africans struggling with from a rights perspective? Specifically, looking at service delivery, what are the core top three issues that dominate those 6,000 complaints across communities?
Yeah.
If you can paint a picture for me of what South Africans are experiencing.
The first one that we deal with almost on a daily basis is the right to access to clean water. So the right to water is the first one. The second one has to do with the right to shelter or the right to access to housing. That's the biggest one. That's the second biggest one. And then thirdly, education, and as well as other issues of service delivery, such as waste management, spill sewage. Those are the three biggest issues, and all of them, as I said, have to do with, number one, the collapse of certain municipalities. There's no doubt that we are dealing with a lot of municipalities that are dysfunctional. So as the South African Human Rights Commission, we do the investigation, we give recommendations, and sometimes we go to court. But in the context of municipalities that are dysfunctional, if you look at the AG's report, in the context of constant changes with municipal managers, the mayor, is really a big problem. Of course, the second problem is the budgeting. As the South African Human Rights Commission, we are concerned that the budget passed by the national government, the budget passed by municipalities are not constitutional compliant. They do not assist us to progressively realize socio-economic rights. So austerity, as well as corruption, as well as mismanagement, all collude to impact on issues of service delivery and also the realization of socio-economic rights.
Thank you so much. We're in conversation with Professor Tshepo Madlingozi, who's the full-time commissioner at the South African Human Rights Commission. We are going to go to headlines. Prof, maybe when we come back, you can also just explain the difference, because I see a lot of messages around NGOs and funding and the Human Rights Commission versus those NGOs. And maybe you can draw us a comparison between the work and identifying the Human Rights Commission versus other non-governmental players. But we'll also put the questions that you have for him. I'll allow him to hear the criticism. I'm seeing a lot of criticism, and that's that issue where I think people don't fully comprehend or understand the role of this Chapter 9 institution as far as our democracy is concerned, and how critical it is in upholding and being one of the pillars that upholds our democracy. But begin to Professor Tshepo Madlingozi, full-time commissioner at the commission. Prof, this constant confusion, I think, when it comes to the Human Rights Commission, where people think it's an NGO, I don't think so. It is provided for in a slightly different category, if I'm correct, under our constitution, isn't it?
It is, as I said, we are established by the Constitution, Chapter 9 in the Constitution, which gives us, number one, the independence. Number two, commissioners are appointed by the president upon recommendations of the parliament. So we are presidential appointees as commissioners. I must say that we operate in the ecosystem with other Chapter 9 institutions in the first place. So the CGE, the Commission for Gender Equality, the
Public protector.
IEC, and so forth. We are in that ecosystem. The difference between us and NGOs is that, number one, NGOs are non-governmental institutions. They are not accountable to the state. They raise their own funding either from South Africa or overseas. We are accountable to the public via parliament. We get our budget from the state. And number three, we've got certain powers that NGOs don't have. So, for example, as a commissioner, I can subpoena any state official, including the president, including a minister. We are able, number two, to convene inquiries. And if anyone doesn't come to those inquiries, we can subpoena them. And if anyone lies during our subpoenas, that's perjury because that's under oath. We also have the powers of search and seizure. So we are able to go into any building to seize material that will assist us in our investigation. And then the last power that we have, of course, is that we've got the powers to monitor, and we are able to undertake announced and unannounced monitoring activities. So the difference essentially is that NPOs or NGOs are, as the name says, they're non-governmental institutions. We are an independent constitutional body.
All right, so I've got lots of calls and voice notes and WhatsApps for you. I'm going to go to Koketso in the East Rand. Koketso, hi. You can speak to Professor Madlingozi.
Yes, hi, Tshidi, and hi to your guest. I just wanted to ask, in terms of communities that have almost like service delivery failures, where, you know, for instance, maybe a service provider was supposed to, plant maize for us, like what happened in our community, and then this service provider failed to fulfill that thing, and they were paid. You know, money was dispersed. Is that something that you can write to the South African Human Rights Commission about?
All right, Prof.
Yes, that sounds like it's a violation of the right to a safe environment. So it does fall within our purview. But secondly, it will also fall under the purview of the public protector if there are allegations of corruption or mismanagement or maladministration. So for us, we'll look at it from a perspective of human rights, whether that municipality is fulfilling its rights in terms of, socio-economic rights, the right to safe environment, and then the public protector will look at consequences in terms of corruption and maladministration. So certainly, the caller can bring the case to us.
All right, I'm going to play you a couple of voice notes where there are also questions being put to you there.
Good morning, Tshidi. I would just like to understand how are they mandated to also represent people who already broke the law. An illegal immigrant means they already broke the law. So they see it fit to spend their resources on somebody who's illegal here. Why wouldn't you use more resources on people who are here legally? I don't understand the part where they represent illegal immigrant to further break the law of being in places that they shouldn't be. They illegally occupy spaces. The hijacking of buildings. They would go and represent such illegality. I don't understand that part.
Morning, CD and the Prof there. I'm one of those who are opposed to movements like Dudula. Although their reasoning or intentions might be, beneficial to South Africans or to South Africa as a country, the methods by which they're going about, I'm against them. Like the Prof says there, the law is clear. You cannot propagate hate speech, and you cannot take the law into your own hands. And the major problem I have with such movements is they are general approach. They're generalizing everyone who's not of South African nationality. I mean, why can't we target criminality and single out those who are breaking the law? And I always say they tend to be barking at the wrong tree or trees. I mean, our major problem is our porous borders. And why can't we to target those officials who are corrupt, who are taking bribes from these illegal immigrants who are pouring into our country?
Prof, I mean, the first question, I think you've answered it so many times in the session, but that to me speaks to the lack of understanding that the general public has about the role of the Human Rights Commission. Do you recognize that something is amiss and that maybe more work needs to be done in helping South Africans understand how you serve them?
Yeah, no, let me start by saying, all of us, must acknowledge that service delivery failures are pervasive. All of us must acknowledge that we have got a huge unemployment crisis. All of us, we must acknowledge that crime is rampant and crime is also pervasive. So all of those are very genuine concerns, and we are constantly holding the state accountable. Let me give you two examples. We've just released an RDP report in Mpumalanga, where we investigated in Mpumalanga Northwest, where we investigated the issue of RDP houses. And we found that number one, a lot of RDP houses are substandard, meaning that they were not constructed to the required standard. Number two, a lot of corruption in the allocation of those houses. And certainly in some of those houses, they are occupied by foreign nationals that are not supposed to occupy them. And our reports are very clear to say the state, you must act, you must attend to this corruption. So South Africans are allowed to complain about issues of hijacked buildings. We are now involved in the OCDSO inquiry, where we are showing the commission that the issue of hijacked buildings, the issue of bad buildings is a very serious concern and that the state must act. We are in court every week holding municipalities accountable for not attending to hijacked buildings, not using expropriation tools that they have. So those are all genuine concerns. But we must be very clear, Tshidi and the listeners, that number one, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. The issue of Stilfontein that the caller was alluding to, we are very clear that the state must arrest, illegal miners, and they must take them to court. What is not allowed to do is the allegations of starvation as a method of policing. What is not allowed is to, you know, find people guilty even before a court has done so. So we are very clear there. The second issue about the Operation Dudula and other operations. As I said, we are very clear that we support peaceful protests. We support people calling out unregulated migration, but we are very clear that the constitution applies to everyone. All of us has got the right to dignity. The last point that I must say is this: almost 800,000 South Africans do not have documentation, either because of issues to do with Home Affairs and the problems at Home Affairs, or to do with the issues of blocked IDs, or to do with fraud. So about almost a million South Africans are undocumented. So to presume that everyone who's undocumented must not receive services a lot of those people are South Africans, and we really need to, one, attend to regulations of migration, but secondly, we need to be very clear that, everyone deserves documentation who is South African.
How do we measure as far as human rights on a global scale is concerned as South Africa? Is the Human Rights Commission satisfied that we're moving in the right direction? Are we where do we stand? I remember it must have been COVID times where there was a big complaint about widespread unemployment, inequality, poverty, and government's own response was found wanting to some degree. When we do a comparison between us and other countries, how do we measure?
Yes, we measure okay. The Human Rights Commission is an A-rated institution according to the United Nations. So every year the United Nations look at our work. An independent subcommittee of the United Nations look at our independence, looks at our work, looks at our impact, and every year they score us consistently. For the past 15 years, we have received an A-rated status. Secondly, our constitution contains rights that are not contained in other countries. So our framework, our constitutional framework, score very highly if you compare to other countries. We've got specialized courts such as the equality courts, where without needing a lawyer, you can go to court and uphold your rights to equality. So the equality courts is one vehicle. Fourthly, the independence of our judiciary. We score very, very highly because our judiciary is independent, is very robust, as you know. Fifthly, the work that is done by civil society, the space that they have to do their work in a very robust way with freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, that also scores very high. Where we score very badly is on three things. Number one is the ability of the state to roll out service delivery. I don't need to tell you the statistics to do with child hunger. I don't need to explain the statistics to do with lack of access to healthcare, education. My office will be releasing a report next week on the state of schooling and some of the issues that we found there to do with infrastructure, overcrowding, and so forth. Thirdly, we score badly when it comes to equality. South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. It's not the fault of the new state. It's an issue that has been there for the past 350 years, but we can do better in terms of addressing inequality. So the issue of inequality, the measures that we've put in place for redress, affirmative action, BE, the implementation can be improved. So on paper, we score very well, but when it comes to issues of bread and butter, issues of service delivery, issues of reconciliation and equality, and then thirdly, issues to do with state accountability, we can do better.
I'm going to take another break. When I come back, more of your voice notes and questions to Professor Tshepo Madlingozi. We are in conversation with the SA Human Rights Commission. There are a lot of questions that have come through for Professor Tshepo Madlingozi. Prof, I want you to listen to these voice notes. More questions from our listeners.
Tshidi, my question to the Human Rights Commission is about the Competition Commission. Where you find a shop is increasing prices for the citizens illegally so, and as soon as the Competition Commission finds out, they fine that company, but there's no recourse for the public who were robbed. The commission takes that money that they fine that company without any rewards to the people who were robbed. Like for instance, if a price of bread was increased illegally, I buy the price of bread. When they find them, I don't have any recourse. They don't come back to me and say, you're going to buy bread for a lower price from this time to that time, so that
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.